Revenge isn't about proving a point. It's about making them feel the loss, without you lifting a finger. Most people think of revenge as an explosive confrontation, a calculated move to make the other person suffer. But the truth is, the most devastating revenge doesn't require action at all, because nothing haunts a person more than the silence they weren't expecting. When someone wrongs you, they expect a reaction. They expect anger, frustration, begging, or even hatred. Any reaction feeds their ego, because as long as you're reacting, they still have control. But what happens when you go silent? When you refuse to play the game? When you walk away without a word? They don't just lose you, they lose their power over you. And that, more than anything else, destroys them. Imagine a manipulator who thrives on control. They play mind games, push your buttons, and expect you to keep coming back, because that's what always happens. But this time, instead of fighting back, instead of explaining, instead of giving them anything, you vanish. No last message, no argument, no closure. Just silence. At first, they act like they don't care. They tell themselves you'll be back. But as the days pass, their confidence fades. As the weeks go by, doubt creeps in. Then suddenly, they're the ones obsessing over you. Why aren't you reacting? Did they push too far? Are you actually over them? What was once their game is now their nightmare. And when someone expects you to chase them, but instead you disappear, they start chasing you. This is why silence is the ultimate revenge, because it forces them to feel everything they tried to avoid. But the true power of silence isn't just about the immediate impact. It's about what happens next, the slow, creeping realization that they have no control left. And that's when the real suffering begins. Why silence hurts more than words. Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a vacuum of power, a space where the manipulator loses control, where their tactics fail, where they are left with nothing but their own thoughts. For someone who thrives on manipulation and control, silence is not just frustrating, it's terrifying. Manipulators need feedback. They poke, provoke, and push, waiting for you to react. Every argument, every emotional response, every desperate plea gives them exactly what they want, proof that they still have power over you. But what happens when you don't react? When their insults are met with nothing? When their attempts to provoke you are ignored? They lose their foundation. Like a magician whose tricks no longer work, they suddenly realize they have nothing left to play with. And that realization, it breaks them. People who manipulate others rarely reflect on their own actions. They blame, they project, they avoid accountability at all costs. But when you go silent, you take away their ability to shift the blame onto you. Now, they have no one to fight, no one to argue with, no one to twist reality for. They are left alone, forced to sit with their own thoughts, their own guilt, their own emptiness. And for someone who has always relied on controlling others, that's a terrifying place to be. A manipulator only has power if you give it to them. If you argue, they have control over your emotions. If you seek closure, they dictate when the conversation ends. If you keep engaging, they remain relevant in your life. But the moment you remove yourself from the game, they lose everything. No matter how much they try to reach you, no matter how many messages they send, no matter how hard they push, it doesn't matter, because you've already won. Think about the last time someone ignored a message you sent. Even if it was unintentional, it bothered you, didn't it? Now imagine that feeling, multiplied. Manipulators hate being ignored. At first they act indifferent, but as the silence stretches on, their behavior shifts. They send another message, then another. Then they start calling. When that doesn't work, they get angry. And when that still doesn't work, they panic, because now they're the ones desperate for a response. That's the power of silence. It doesn't just hurt in the moment, it plants a seed that grows over time until they're the ones trapped in an endless loop of uncertainty. But the real psychological torture of being ignored doesn't stop there. It triggers something even deeper, something that manipulative people fear more than anything else. The psychological torture of being ignored. Silence isn't just absence, it's a psychological weapon. When someone ignores you, your mind doesn't accept it as a simple act of disengagement. It perceives it as a problem to be solved. And for manipulators, people who thrive on control, being ignored is torture. The human brain is wired to seek closure. It hates open-ended situations, unanswered questions, and unresolved emotions. That's why ghosting is so painful. That's why being left on read lingers in the back of your mind. That's why the lack of an explanation is more haunting than a confrontation. When a manipulator loses access to you, their brain enters panic mode. Why did they stop responding? Are they angry? Are they planning something? Did I lose control over them? With no information to process, their mind spirals into obsession. They replay every past interaction, looking for signs, trying to make sense of something that was never meant to make sense. And the more time passes, the worse it gets. Predictability is power. If someone can predict your reactions, they can control you. But when you go silent, you become unpredictable. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know if you're angry, indifferent, or planning something, and that terrifies them, because uncertainty leads to anxiety. Anxiety leads to overthinking, and overthinking leads to desperation. At first, they may act like they don't care. Then they start checking their phone more often. Then they start testing you, sending messages, creating fake emergencies, trying to provoke a reaction. And when that doesn't work, they break. In the beginning, they believe they've won. They assume you'll come back, because that's what always happens. But as days turn into weeks, something shifts. You're still gone. You're not reacting. You've become unreachable. And that's when their confidence crumbles into desperation. They go from thinking they have control to realizing they lost it. They go from ignoring you to constantly checking if you've responded. They go from feeling powerful to feeling powerless. There was once a person trapped in a toxic relationship, constantly manipulated, guilt-tripped, and emotionally drained. They always fought back, always defended themselves, always tried to make things right. Until one day, they just stopped. No explanation, no last words, just disappearance. At first, the manipulator celebrated, thinking they had won. But then, days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The manipulator sent messages, no response. They created drama, still nothing. They tried getting mutual friends involved, but the person had already moved on, and for the first time ever, the manipulator was the one who couldn't let go. Silence had turned the tables. And if you think that's powerful, wait until you see how silence can completely break them. Because once the dynamic shifts, they aren't just thinking about you, they are chasing you. Going silent as a power move, flipping the control. When you walk away without a word, you send a message louder than any argument ever could. Because in any conflict, the person who cares less always holds the power. The moment you go silent, you take back control. Manipulators thrive on your reactions. They push, provoke, and guilt-trip, because as long as you respond, they know they still have influence over you. But when you stop responding, they lose everything. They can't manipulate a person who won't engage. They can't twist your words if you don't give them any. They can't control your emotions if they don't know what you feel. When you go silent, you break the cycle of manipulation. You remove the oxygen that fuels their power, and you force them into a position of weakness. The most unsettling thing you can do to someone who once controlled you? Disappear completely. No messages, no updates, no indirect signals, just pure, unbreakable silence. This creates an information void, a psychological space where they no longer know anything about you. Are you thinking about them? Are you angry? Have you moved on? Are you planning something? They have no idea, and the unknown is what destroys them, because as long as they don't have answers, their mind will create them. And in most cases, their imagination will torture them more than reality ever could. People don't chase what's readily available. They chase what they can't have. When you were engaged in their manipulation, you were predictable. They knew exactly how to provoke you, exactly what to say, exactly when to pull you back in. But now, you're a mystery, and the more silent you are, the more desperate they become. They start sending random messages just to test if you'll respond. They try to reconnect through mutual friends, hoping for an update. They create fake emergencies just to get your attention. And when none of that works, they obsess. Because suddenly, they're the ones who feel powerless. A person was stuck in a toxic relationship, manipulated, gaslighted, and emotionally drained. For years, they fought back, tried to explain, tried to prove their worth. Until one day, they just stopped. No final argument, no long messages, no goodbye. They simply vanished. At first, the manipulator laughed it off, believing they had won. But as the weeks passed, something changed. They started checking old conversations. They started asking mutual friends for updates. They started wondering, did I actually lose them? And before they knew it, they were the ones chasing. All because silence turned the tables. But to make this strategy truly effective, you must avoid the common mistakes, because one wrong move can undo everything. The biggest mistakes that ruin silent revenge. Silence is only powerful when it's done perfectly. Most people fail because they make small but critical mistakes. Mistakes that completely undo the psychological damage they were inflicting. If you break the silence the wrong way, you don't just lose momentum, you give them back control. The biggest mistake? Caving in too early. At first, silence drives them crazy. The uncertainty eats away at them. But just when they're about to break, you give in. You reply to their message. You react to their social media post. You let them know you're still thinking about them, and in that moment, they win. Because now they know you were waiting. They know the silence was just a tactic, and instead of making them desperate for you, you just proved you're still emotionally invested. Once that happens, the power shift is reversed instantly. Silent revenge only works if they believe you've truly moved on. That means no checking their social media, no mutual friends delivering messages for you, no subtle hints that you're still watching. Because the moment they sense you still care, the effect is ruined. Why? Because people only feel loss when they believe something is truly gone. If they think you're still emotionally involved, they won't experience real regret or obsession. Instead, they'll assume, they're still thinking about me. I still have a chance to pull them back in. And as long as they believe that, they don't suffer. Silence only works as a weapon if they don't know you're using it as one. If they sense you're doing it to punish them, they'll resist its effects. They'll tell themselves, they're just trying to manipulate me. I won't let them get the satisfaction. This is just a game. They'll break first. But if they don't realize it's a strategy, They won't be able to stop the psychological torment. They'll start questioning, did I mess up? Are they really over me? What if I actually lost them forever? And that's when the real panic begins. A person was executing perfect, silent revenge. For weeks, they didn't respond. They didn't engage. The manipulator was breaking down, sending messages, trying to get a reaction. Then, out of nowhere, they sent a single message. Hey, I hope you're doing okay. And in that moment, everything collapsed. The manipulator stopped suffering. They stopped obsessing. Why? Because that one message confirmed they were still thinking about them. The mystery was gone. The psychological pressure was relieved. And just like that, the manipulator got their power back. Never break first. Never show weakness. Never let them know you care, because the moment you do, you lose everything. Now, let's take silent revenge to its highest level, where it's not just about ignoring them, but about truly becoming untouchable. The ultimate silent revenge. Becoming a ghost. They can't forget. Going silent is powerful. But the ultimate silent revenge, it's when they realize they've lost you forever and there's nothing they can do about it. This isn't just about ignoring them. It's about erasing their influence from your life so completely that they are left haunted by the thought of you. Silence alone isn't enough. Because if deep down you're still angry, still checking on them, still waiting for them to notice, you're still emotionally connected. True revenge happens when you no longer care. You don't react to their name. You don't wonder if they're thinking about you. You don't feel anything because they no longer exist in your world. And when you reach that level of detachment, they lose all control over you. And ironically, that's when they start suffering the most. Because now they can't read you. They can't predict your emotions. They can't use your feelings against you because you have none left for them. The greatest revenge isn't just disappearing. It's returning as someone they can never have again. When they finally check in, when they stalk your social media, when they ask mutual friends about you, they expect to find the same person they once controlled. Instead, they find someone stronger, better, and completely unreachable. You've upgraded your mindset. You've built a new life without them. You've evolved into a version of yourself that would never tolerate them again. And when they realize this, the regret hits, because they didn't just lose you. They lost the chance to ever be part of your world again. This is the final blow, the move that makes silent revenge truly devastating. When they look for you, they should see you winning, but they should also see that they no longer have access to you. Your life is thriving without them. You are happier, stronger, and completely out of reach. And no matter what they do, they can't get back in. Because here's the brutal truth. People don't value what they have. They value what they lost. And when they realize you're truly gone, when they know they will never get another chance, that's when the pain really begins. Someone spent years in a toxic relationship, always manipulated, always undervalued. One day, instead of fighting back or trying to prove their worth, they simply disappeared. No closure, no last words, just silence. At first, their ex felt nothing. They assumed they could always come back, but months later, when they finally checked in, they saw someone unrecognizable. The person they once controlled had completely transformed. They were thriving, successful, glowing with confidence. And worst of all, they were unreachable. No texts were answered. No attempts to reconnect worked. No doors were left open. And for the first time, the manipulator felt true loss. They hadn't just lost a person. They had lost access to a world they could never be part of again. At this point, you're no longer just ignoring them. You've made yourself impossible to reach. And that's the real victory. Because silence isn't just a lack of words. It's the loudest message you'll ever send. The final execution. The best revenge isn't anger. It isn't confrontation. It's silence. Because silence forces them to feel everything they tried to avoid. It forces them to sit with their own guilt, their own regrets, their own insecurities, without the comfort of blaming you, manipulating you, or pulling you back in. And the longer the silence lasts, the deeper the damage sinks in. Silence is the most powerful revenge, because it leaves them feeling powerless, out of control, and completely lost. The brain hates uncertainty, so when you vanish, their mind spirals into anxiety, overthinking, and obsession. Not reacting is the only way to take back full control. The moment you break silence, you lose the psychological edge. The biggest mistake? Letting them know you still care. The only way they will truly feel your loss is if they believe you have completely moved on. And the final blow, growing into someone they can't access. When they see you thriving, but know they will never be part of your life again, that's when they truly lose. This is the ultimate silent execution. You don't argue, you don't explain, you don't seek revenge. You simply disappear and let them destroy themselves. Now it's your turn. Have you ever used silence as a power move? What was the result?